So I'll talk briefly now about Screeds, and I'll give it my brief piece, but should Screeds be bonded or unbonded? This is a major question. It sounds like a Shakespeare, to do or not to do, or to be or not to be. It's a major one. You know, Screeds, I would say 9 times out of 10 from what we see out in the marketplace are normally fully bonded to a membrane system. Is that right or is that wrong? I believe that there's a place to have bonded Screeds. They need to be a high quality Screed in that situation. However, many manuals, and as I mentioned before with these hardies ones, recommend unbonded Screeds. So how do you put a Screed together that's unbonded? If you look at some of the details, and some of the major brands out there will give recommendations on the minimum Screed height, but it needs to be reinforced. And I don't believe that I'm seeing many Screeds out there that are applied on a slip sheet, for example, that are reinforced with mesh. So these are things we still haven't got a full agreement with around the country, and it doesn't happen, and it's not policed out there. You'll see the principle of a slip sheet with an unbonded Screed has merit, particularly on a structural sheeting surface, for the fact is you are isolating the potential movement from the surface through to the tile finish, which is really important and stops the cracking. However, there might be situations where having that loose laid Screed is not feasible because of the minimum heights you're going to have to achieve around drainage points. And so these are things that need to be taken into account. Efflorescence, I mentioned briefly earlier, it is becoming more and more of a headache out there. There's some really good people out in the country that have written pieces on this and are experts in efflorescence. We don't advise that we are the experts in efflorescence, but we deal with it. What we do deal with is how to minimise it, and having a good admixture. And don't use PVAs in your Screeds, guys, okay? That's for if you want to do art and craft work, use a PVA. When you're serious about waterproofing and you want to have a Screed that's going to reduce the water absorption and uptake, use an SPR or a really good acrylic bonding agent that's going to give you enhanced properties to the Screed mix, okay? We've got some additives in our range like our 11 wide that can remain immersed. But that is one of the things that we always are very, very strong on with admixtures in Screeds, and that will reduce the phenomenon of efflorescence. Again, waterproofing over and under the Screed, an important one. The sub-Screed drainage falls, okay, we mentioned before, preventing water just from sitting on under the Screed. What are you going to do there? Are you going to waterproof that first? I see a lot of guys out there doing the right thing, and as a waterproofing manufacturer, we'll tell you to waterproof under and over the Screed, and it sounds like it's a sell job, but I'm really, I get it, it's a reinforcement for me to see guys out there doing that off the bat, because they believe that's the right way, ensuring the substrate is sealed, the Screed's done properly, and then a waterproofing surface on top again. And that might change depending if you're using a sheet or a liquid system as well, and where you use those systems, because you've also got to make sure you don't trap the moisture in those Screeds when it is over and under. But very, very important to take that into consideration when you're designing that. The keys to prevent obviously water absorbing into a Screed is how the Screed is designed to ensure water is falling away. So the use of an admixture in a Screed is critical because it'll reduce the absorption into that piece if you haven't waterproofed on top of the Screed, but ensuring the falls are right, very, very important. There are some technologies now that are coming to the market with lightweight alternatives to Screeds that we're seeing out there with boards and sheet designs from various manufacturers out in the marketplace. I believe that this trend will continue around the country. In the future, there's a lot of upside of those, A being the weight reduction, B OH&S because you're not carrying sand cement on site or craning sand cement on site up high onto floors, but also you've got a situation where you overcome things like we mentioned before, efflorescence, etc., and the reduction of absorption into the Screed surface itself. I'm going to talk briefly, I know I keep harping on about New Zealand, but I've seen a couple of systems over there with our customers, and I love the way what they do over there with brands, which we spoke about a few weeks ago. Brands will not appraise a membrane method of tiling directly to a membrane externally. You can do it in bathrooms, but externally you cannot tile directly to the primary membrane system. So what they do is they would use a system like our Gripset 2P out on the balcony. It is waterproofing that substrate, can handle ponding water. The falls would be put underneath that membrane system, and then they'll use what they call a decoupling method over the top. And the idea and the principle behind that is that when the tiles are bonded to that decoupling system, if there's a problem later on or a cracked tile down the track, when that tile is removed, it is not damaging the membrane surface itself. You can take the decoupling method off along with the tiles. It doesn't impact the integrity of the home or the building while that work is happening. The membrane's still intact, and then they reapply the decoupling or the tiles to be applied. There's some photos that are coming up now on that. Take note of it. I again think that's going to be a method for quality waterproofing going on in the future in Australia. I'm going to just end on a couple notes. Workmanship. The builder, it is critical. Okay, waterproofer, always the main one, and also then we've got the tiler, and that might be now the tiler laying ceramic tiles or the tiler with pedestal pavers, which is a very common one, and we do see sometimes decking applied over membranes. If you are applying decking over membrane and you've got battens going down onto that floor, glue them down with a decent adhesive that's compatible with the membrane. Obviously don't screw and nail the battens through the membrane system. But if you are putting pedestal pavers down, it's important to treat the membrane system with care, and obviously that membrane system needs to have a really good Sure hardness and durability that can handle the sort of traffic that might be on there while those pedestal pavers are being installed. Something to take note of. And we always recommend a flood test of the membrane surface prior to putting any of these finishes on. Be 100% certain it's waterproof, you can handle flooding, and then the waterproofer can walk away, and then the after trade must make sure they take care of that system to ensure it remains that way. So let's just recap on ensuring the long-term performance. Good design, critical, involves draftsmen, architects and builders, etc., engineers. Correct product selection, very, very important. Okay, there are a number of membranes that can be used, and systems, types of membranes and systems for external wet areas. Let's get that right. The workmanship goes without saying, always important. As I mentioned, I believe in flood testing afterwards, and that way you can be certain that you've covered everything, and if anything needs to be repaired, it's much easier to do it before the tiles are applied on there. And the collective responsibility and communication between the trades. This is the piece that we're missing, and not just the trades. There's probably an area of discussion here, guys, that you might want to come back at me on, but we need to get the authorities, we need to get the HA, the MBA, building consultants, master trade associations, the waterproofers, engineers, architects, etc. together and get this right, because the reality is, even in a city like Sydney, I could go from north to south from different suburbs, and like I said before, out of 10 balconies, I would find that if they were all built with structural sheeting, if I could get 5 of them that are done properly, I'm having an incredible day, and that is not the case, and it's horses for courses. But the problem is anything goes out there, and so very important that we come up with a method, because we are building now, as our country gets more dense in population, we are building more multi-storey buildings out there, and no one just wants to be locked up inside. There are balconies and podiums that are being integrated into these designs, and if we don't get this right, we are just going to end up with that whole leaking house syndrome, which we spoke about many, many weeks ago. This is a piece that we need to get right nationally as one body, so we've been certain that there are standards in place and procedures and processes that overcome this issue. So it has been a long one on balconies and decks, but thanks for joining me. Please let me know if you've got any questions or you'd like to contribute to anything that I might have forgotten on it. Let's get the discussion and conversation happening. We'll see you for another episode of Seal for Good next time. Ciao.